Okay. We are live on the Made for Socials podcast. Keep saying it, but it is now the Made for Socials podcast because it was originally the Made for Video podcast. But since we're covering broader social media stuff, it's changed the name. So I'm just going to make that clear. So when you're searching for it, it's Made for Socials podcast. But today I'm really excited for this one. Just before we came on, I was saying that I feel like it's been a long time coming, this one. But we've got Alison Blackler, who... I'm just gonna read like the notes that I've got, and then obviously you can expand on it. So you empower leaders to create high performing teams through advanced communication, boosting engagement, and you are an award winning founder of Two Minds. You're also a public speaker. You're also an author, a podcast host, and you've got over 30 years experience.
That is right.
So for anyone in my audience who may not know who you are, obviously I've just described what you do, but can you kind of expand on that for us and obviously introduce yourself?
So thank you firstly for having me on your show. I love people. So what I do is help people make sense of themselves so that they can make the changes they want, because people often know that they want to change something, but they don't really know how, they don't really know what to do. And they often are listening to some of the noise on social media that's implying that it's really easy to do things like this. So I like to have really open and honest conversations about the fact that yes, you can have and be and do whatever it is that you want, but there are lots of things that you'll need to do basically to manage this piece of kit that lives in our heads, which is us. And for me, understanding ourselves is really what I'm about. And I've made a business doing exactly that.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So tell me a little bit about Two Minds. I'm really interested in that.
So Two Minds was born 14 years ago. And I left the NHS after 24 years, having been a therapist for most of that time. And when I set up Two Minds, I kind of, the name itself is kind of almost part of the story, because for me, it was helping minds come together. We have a conscious and an unconscious mind, and a lot of my training helps us understand the relationship between the two. Two people are going to come together and do some work. People often say they're in two minds about things. So for me, Two Minds is a business, but it's really a place that people can start to think about what is actually happening for them when it comes to their mind. Because that's the word actually, because so much of what we do is in complete autopilot.
That is so true. So I suppose the question leading on from that is sort of, it goes without saying how important communication is, but how important is communication? I mean, because I've been in, I feel like I've been quite lucky in a way, because I didn't actively choose this, but all through my working life, I've always been in a environment where I was front facing to people. So naturally, I'm not a great communicator. In fact, the opposite. I'm a terrible communicator. But just being lucky, I fell into positions where I've been forced to improve communications in ways. But yeah, like how important actually is it? I mean, from the bottom through teams, through working with colleagues, through being self-employed, all that stuff. Like, where does it lie on the sort of hierarchy of importance within businesses?
I think it's probably the most important thing is how we communicate, how we understand each other. So I think for me, there's layers of this, which makes it complicated, because humans are complicated. Yeah. They're amazing, but they're complicated. And I think one of the things I like to pay attention to is it's not just the communication. So I like have a lot of businesses that I'll say we're always communicating, we're always telling people what's going on, and we've got our newsletter and we've got our notice boards and we've got, or whatever. They think they're doing a great job. But the challenge that we've got is that every single person that receives that communication piece will interpret it differently. Now you can't cater for that because you can't wholly cater for that because we're all different. But not checking and not spending time finding out how and what it's meant to somebody else is where businesses go wrong.
Sure.
Because they say, I've done the communication. So they've sent out the email with all the information. It's not enough because people will interpret it differently. And we have got to go and help people understand that it is how you communicate it. It's not what you communicate. And I think the other side of it, the other flip side of communication is that we all need to take more responsibility for ourselves so that we get the information that we need and that we deal with our own emotional response to things better before we take action. Because what we're doing all the time, you'll have it if you might see somebody's name come up on your phone, and last time it was a bit, you'll automatically have emotional response to that name. You haven't even opened the email yet. You haven't even opened the text yet. And I think when it comes to communication, we've got to be able to really manage that emotional part of our brain for the first response, and then wait until we've really understood what it is. But I think the other thing that's really interesting about communication, of course, is the communication that we have with ourselves about ourselves, and that's usually definitely, not just usually, definitely got room for change because we are often chit-chatting to ourselves that isn't really helpful.
For sure. That really rings true with me, actually. That, do you know, like, funny enough, a few weeks back with my business coach, we done like a values activity, and it was really interesting actually because about 3 years ago I'd done one with my old business coach, and it gave me like basically what you do is you filter out values from what's important to you, what's important to the business, all this great stuff, and the values had actually changed over 3 years. So what was slightly more important to me then and not as important to me now, but in the recent one that I just done, was ownership, actually. Like, just really taking ownership of everything I can control. And it gave me some food for thought, and I actually went down a bit of a rabbit hole on YouTube, like looking at this stuff, and actually just using the word I rather than you is just something you can really do to just take ownership of things. So it's like, instead of like, as soon as you say you, if you're a boss and you say you've done this or you've done that, it's like people get defensive and they put the guards up, and that's like, as soon as you say you, it's just like, right, it's on now, we're going to have an argument or you're going to get into some conflict or whatever. But if you just say I, it puts everything on you. Now, it doesn't eradicate the need for maybe an uncomfortable conversation, or it won't stop people doing shitty things every now and then, or bad things happening. But at least you're owning it. At least you're in control of that situation, and you're not reactive to something else that might be going on. If that makes sense.
No, definitely. I mean, I think this is this piece about responsibility. I mean, in a discussion or a heated discussion, when you start, as you say, saying you've made me feel like this, you've upset me, it's just a fight. If you say, for me, this is what's going on, this is how I feel, this is what is going on, then people have to listen a bit.
100%. Like, I'd love to get your input on this, because I don't know how scientifically backed this is, or whether it's like an actual thing. But I've always thought, when it comes to conflict, whether it's in like personal or working relationships, or any relationship or any communication, if there's some form of conflict or an argument, say, it's not you versus them, it's you and them, and then something in the middle that's causing this conflict. So actually, you'd be better served taking ownership and solving the thing in the middle, where you get a mutual win out of it, than you've done this, and no one wins that, and then you actually lose track of what was in the middle in the first place.
Definitely, and often in those kind of situations, what actually is at the root of it isn't usually what you're arguing about. So it'll be something silly somebody's, I don't know, forgot to put the bin out or something stupid. But at the bottom of that is something
100%.
else that isn't being talked about
Sure.
at all. And it might be about somebody's needs. It might be that somebody just, that emotional response that I was mentioning before. The brain gets emotionally involved in everything 5 times quicker than any logic.
That is
So, the logic's the slow
just
train.
repeat that for me.
So the emotional brain gets involved 5 times quicker than your logical, rational brain. So your emotional brain to everything, to an email, to what's on the telly, to what you think somebody's doing over there, a look that you think somebody's given you, everything that people say. Your emotional brain is the fast train, and it's there first of all. Boom, you'll have an emotional response. Your logical, rational brain is like the slow train. It's like coming in much slower, taking its time. But you've had the emotional response. And that's what gets people into all sorts of a mess, is they respond with the emotional response instead of the more logical, rational brain. When you actually pause and think, well, what was it that bothered me? Well, and you can suddenly see the logic. You can see either the logic of actually, yeah, that really did hurt me, or you can see the logic of like, flipping heck, that's got nothing to do with that person. That's just my stuff. And I think when we start to understand that, we can improve our communication with ourselves, and we can improve our communication with each other.
That's just blown my mind. That has really blown my mind. So, yeah, that really has blown my mind. So you've said you've been doing this for like 30 years. So it's like communication styles. Like, obviously, we grew up in an era where, social media wasn't around. We used to have, you remember the old house phones, which you had to turn the key with and all that stuff. So, like, a quick little anecdote on this. My dad used to tell me that he met my mum in 1979, and they lived 2 miles apart. Relatively not far, but for a walk, that's quite far just to meet someone. But they didn't have a house phone, so in order to like sort of speak to each other, he would have to walk from his house all the way to either a phone box or like walk the whole 2 miles and just basically take a chance that she was actually in.
Yeah, same. When I used to remember arranging for somebody to ring a phone box at say 6 o'clock, and then you'd get there and someone else was in the phone box, and you used to go, "Oh no, there's nothing you could do."
But isn't it weird though that like if you compare that to these days? I mean, obviously, I'm happily in a relationship. Like, well, we've got kids and everything now, so I'm not in that world anymore. But even if you went to go on a date with someone, you would be able to sort of know everything about them through their social media profile, even just like pre even meeting them.
But he had none of that.
So how do you think that's affected communication styles over that course of time?
I mean, like anything, my observations are that in one way, it is amazing that we can find out things. We can, there are information can be really good, but I think in the main, because the brain is still functions like it did then and like it did when we were all crawling around in the jungle. That natural mechanism that's inside of us all, it doesn't really work when we've got so much information and we can find out. I mean, if people feel, if you think about things like insecurities, when I was younger, if people felt insecure, they didn't really have a lot of evidence to be able to add to it. There certainly wasn't hundreds of photographs to look through. There certainly wasn't, because people misinterpret things. Sure, yeah. People see things that aren't there. So I think there's so much information that it's actually, when you said that's blown your mind. I mean, that's what's happening. I think everyone's minds are just blown with so much information. There's a lot of disinformation, obviously. We don't know whether we can trust it. So I think it's affecting our ability to trust, because we are getting very suspicious about things, and part of us needs to. but then we are being suspicious about things that do we need to be suspicious about. So I think it's getting a bit of a mash, really, where we don't really know what to think anymore.
For sure.
And that makes it complicated.
It is complicated, and I know this firsthand because obviously I own a social media agency, so all my work with clients is on social media. But we live in a world now where information is at our fingertips. Like everything we need to know about anything, I can find at my fingertips. It's a Google search away, it's a ChatGPT search away, it's a YouTube search away. And there was actually a really scary stat that if you watched YouTube, every minute of YouTube from start to finish, it would take you like 300 years, which is so it's ridiculous, right? Like you're never going to get through all that content in a million years, like literally, like. So if you looked at that and you said, right, okay, all the information I need to know, even this conversation we're having now, in theory, Neil, you could go and find out anything we need to know what we're talking about on a ChatGPT search or Google search. But so information isn't the problem, I don't think, because information's there. Like everything we need is already there to be successful. If we want to make millions of pounds in our business, we can do that. If we want to write a book, we can do that. If we want to create a YouTube series, we can do that. If we want to help people more, we can do that. And it's all at our fingertips. So why don't we? The information's there, so why don't we? So when it comes to like communication with my clients and with the content that I'm trying to put out now, it's more sharing insights and lived experience and being relatable, building relationships. I don't think it's ever been more important because the information's out there. So in theory, if there was 10 Alisons in a row, what's going to make them pick you over the other 10, over the other 9 or 10? It's the fact that they know you and like you and trust you, and the only way you can actually do that is through effective communication, right?
100%. And I think we're crying out for connection and relatable, genuine, authentic, all these words that are being used probably too much now, but I think the essence of what they are is we're crying out for it. We really, really are. And I think being able to communicate in a way that makes people feel safe, makes people feel like you are, because that's the other thing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I see, especially in my field, and I bet you do in your field, there's lots of people who are very good at communicating. They have a very fancy, glossy brochure. They are declaring that they can change your, improve your confidence if you come on my weekend course kind of thing. And they've got all of the right fancy bits that go with it. Their social media might be incredible, but they haven't got the truth behind it. They haven't got that's where I talk about these 30 years. I mean, part of that 30 years has been my own journey for the whole of that 30 years, of which I am, always open to talking about, because I wasn't confident when I was younger at all. So some of my stuff comes from my own experience. But that's where sometimes I look at some things that people are declaring, and they're charging $5,000 to come on my retreat, and we will maximize your confidence and all these things, and you can't do that in a week. No. It's just not possible, and that bit drives me a bit insane. Just watching people being ripped off really, because they're being sold a story and sold a package, because we are so impatient these days, because we want instant, because as you say, everything is there on a fingertip, isn't it? You can order something and it's at your door 24 hours later. We want that for self-development, but it ain't gonna happen. It's a process, a long journey to go on.
I totally agree. And I suppose on quite a deep level, actually, we're here for a short time, not a long time, and you're dead a long time. Like realistically, over 100-year time span, if you're lucky, that's a short time span. But if you look at it in the micro, that's like looking at the macro. if you look at it in the micro, we are here for a long time. So if you're like, maybe, like you said, when you were younger, when I was younger, like coming out of school, 16, 17, 18 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, you do have time on your side. Like, there is time to be patient and make a few mistakes along the way and build and reach your dreams. Like, I didn't start my social media agency till I was 34. And
Yeah.
I'm I'm glad that I didn't. Because if I'd have started it at 24, I wouldn't, it would have failed miserably, to be fair.
Well, this is the thing about life, isn't it? You know, we're all so terrified of making a mistake. You know, we are very bothered about what other people think, which can get in our way. But I think we are, you know, we can be so risk averse that people are like, oh, no, I don't think so. I might fail. But actually, do you know what? You learn your best stuff from, you know, if you can step up and see. I never see anything as a failure. I always see it as, you know, my next step towards my success, really. Sure. And I mean, I remember when I left the NHS, there were people who thought I was absolutely mental. But it was, you know, it was the right time for me. It was the right thing for me to do. And that was 14 years ago. And it hasn't always been all singing, all dancing by any stretch of the imagination, but I would never go back.
Same.
Yeah, I know that. I know that in my heart. You know, I just wouldn't go back. I'm unemployable, I think.
Do you know what though? Like, that's actually, it's a scary place to be. It can be a scary place to be, but actually, it's the safest place to be as well. At the same time, because everything's your fault. Like, the same for me. Like, I've totally became unemployable now. But if I don't make a success of it, I've got no one to blame. I've got no one to.
Yeah.
I can't go, oh, my boss is being a wanker, or oh, my employees are trying to fucking stab me in the back. It's all me, right?
Yeah. Exactly. But that's where you're making mistakes, but you also make it happen. You know, it's up to you. And I think that's something that quite a few people who are employed do find that side of it quite scary, that you do have to go out and make that happen. But actually, there's nothing more satisfying than actually doing that and being at the other side of it and choosing to do things and do it your way and do it well.
You know what? Like, obviously, just before this call, we were talking about Mary, one of my clients, who obviously you're going on their podcast next week, and she's great. Like, she's made a success from her original business, which was construction law, and now she's breaking into the stand-up comedy world and the podcasting world, and she'll talk about this. She talks about this all day long, but the fact that she's basically following her dreams in her 40s and taking on a massive challenge when she's got a successful business. I bet there's lots of people who would just be like, "Don't be so silly. You've built this great business. You've took all this thing," and she's a great example of it. Like, I've got a really great relationship with Mary. She's amazing, and it's that exact thing. It's like, why would you leave a construction law business that you've spent nearly 20 years building to do stand-up comedy where there's no money, or you've got to travel an hour and a half for a 15-minute slot, or like people do look at it as silly, right? Like when I started doing this, like, I was fully booked in face-to-face PT, and I was a fully booked online coach. So I had 2 fully booked businesses, and I was doing lecturing for a company as well, and delivering apprenticeships. So I was successful. Like, I had enough money, I had enough everything, but it just wasn't where my purpose or mission was at that time. And it was, like you said, it was the right thing at the right time. And I left it to do something which I had relatively little experience in. I was like, I'm going to learn it. I'll bend over backwards to do it. And, you know, and it was actually, every time I've been in that position in my life, it's been the best thing I've done.
Yeah. But listen to your language, listen to your drive. You know, you're going to find a way. I'm going to do it. All that is you pointing in a direction of which you want to go. And I think that's the thing when people feel like they're stuck, and they feel like they're in a job or in a relationship or anything where it's not, you know, it's not fulfilling. I think that feeling of stuck is awful. But it's seeing it not as stuck. It's seeing it as there's always options. No matter what your situation, there are always some options. And it's about, in my mind, being curious about, well, what are my options and what could I do? And what's the one small thing that I could do today that might just take me to the next bit of this thing? Because that's the other thing that people do, is they have these sometimes quite big ideas, but then they don't see all the steps. So then they don't go anywhere because they just think, well, I can't get there. I'll never get that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then
For sure.
they just don't do anything then. And it's just so frustrating because they're not happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I see that life cycle all over the place. You know, people stuck in horrible marriages, people stuck in horrible jobs that they hate because it's safe. But
yeah,
I suppose we're from a generation where having a 9 to 5 and having a safe job that you kind of didn't like, but you were just kind of living for the weekend, that was normal. But now we live in a world where actually, if you want to go and, I don't know, cut gardens for £20 an hour, that's more money than what you'd get working in a safe 9 to 5 job in a call centre, being employed by someone.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's such, but all them things now, like half the population, anyone say over 40, would be like, they've had some portion of life where they haven't had social media and they haven't had the digital platforms that we've got now. But we're going to get to a point where all the population have grew up with them platforms. So it's going to be a totally different experience, right? Like, I think you'll see, like, with the, sorry, I'm just going to shut this door. I think with the sort of AI stuff that we've got going on, we've seen the rise of these like online businesses and e-commerce businesses, all this stuff. But actually, I think we're going to see the rise of, like, you know, trades again, because people want human connection. People aren't going to be able to, like,
I hope so.
You know, fix a water pipe with an AI tool. You know what I mean? And I'm quite positive about AI. I'm quite bullish about it, and I think it'll really help us. Actually, it won't be this thing that's going to take over the world or anything. I think we'll all adapt to it.
We need to.
Like we've adapted to things.
I hope so.
Like we've adapted to things in the past. But actually, one thing we'll never lose is human communication, right? And human authenticity and human relationship. And I think that's just important for people to remember, really.
I think so. We're crying out for it. And if you haven't got it, you know, if you do feel a bit isolated and you haven't got that, and even the introverts still need some level of interaction. Yeah. And I think when you haven't got it, sometimes, or maybe when you notice that you're feeling a bit rubbish, and then you notice, well, what am I doing? And you can see that you're not hanging out with somebody enough, then my stretch would be get out and see them, because you will feel so much better. Or even if you haven't got somebody to meet, go into a coffee shop and just be around people. Just notice and watch other people. Because that's the other thing, that there's a few things that I know people do. You know, say you do feel like all your friends are too busy to fit you in and things, and you feel isolated. So my stretch would be go and have a little coffee in a shop somewhere. But then don't sit there making up that everybody else is living the dream and everyone else is super happy and everyone else has got all these friends and everyone else has got this amazing social life, because it's not all amazing for most people some of the time. You know, I think we just need to be remembering that as well, you know, because it is so easy to just get in this trap where we think we're the only ones that are struggling, the only ones are not seeing good things. And it's not true, you know. Even when it's all good, you know, you said you've got a nice family life, it's still going to have moments where it's hard. And that's the way we are as humans. It's quite complicated.
That's it, David, right? Like, no matter what you do, problems will happen. Yeah. Like that's why I suppose that's why we do what we do, because we're problem solvers, right? Like, we've had the lived experience, whether it's been lack of confidence, whether it's been unemployment, whether it's been divorce or separation or grief, whatever. We've had these lived experiences. So like as a coach and a consultant myself now, realistically, all our clients are just former versions of ourselves that we've kind of been through that experience just before they have. That's kind of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to talk about fast tracking people a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, as I said earlier, we learn our best stuff from our most difficult situations. So if you try and avoid situations all the time and stay in the safe lane, you stay in your comfort zone all the time, you won't grow. So if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable because you're having a go at something new, good. Because it means that you are ready to push yourself. Your mind might be absolutely screaming at you saying, don't do it, it's scary, we don't have a reference here. But actually, if you're on the edge of something new, it will feel uncomfortable. But guess what? Once you've had a go and once you've got the right people around you, we can do anything we want, literally anything we want. But staying safe just doesn't serve us. It genuinely just doesn't serve us. So, people like you and I have taken that plunge. We've done all that feeling and made it happen. But so many people don't. They sit and avoid and overthink and just talk themselves into knots about not wanting to take that step forward. And, if anyone's listening today and you've got something that you just think, I'd just love to do that thing, find a way, because you'll just stay miserable if you don't push yourself in some shape or form.
Yeah, 100%. Fucking love it.
But it has to be positive push. Again, the flip side of that is I do see people a lot who are quite broken, who are pushing and pushing and pushing so hard. There's quite a lot of broken people out there at the moment because they're working so hard. And I think there's a real balance to be had between pushing and encouraging yourself and going for something new and pushing outside that comfort zone. But there's also something to be paid attention to when you are pushing so hard that you are literally breaking.
For sure. 100%. That reminds me of something that I learned a while back. Is like perception versus perspective. And we all have our own perceptions. So like our lived reality is all about perception, right? Like we perceive that it's sunny outside. We perceive that it's... So a typical example of this would be like, if it's raining, it's a shit day. And if it's sunny, it's a good day. But why?
Exactly. Like... All days
are
great, aren't they? It's just the weather.
Just weather. Like, so we all live in this like bubble, our own little bubble. And we can't really see outside of that bubble. So what a good coach will do is actually take you out of that bubble and be able to look at the bubble with perspective and go, actually, this is kind of like a blind spot. This might work, and ask the right questions. And when you start looking at it through like a perspective point of view rather than a perception, you'd actually think to yourself, do you know what? When it's perception, it's always like, oh, it's shit. Like, I'm going through some shit time. I'm fucking, nothing's going for me. Like, everything's kind of doom and gloom. When it's perspective, you can say, right, okay, well, actually, this has happened and it's a bit shit, but I learned this out of it. But I've had this experience. Do you know what? I'm not going to do that experience again, and that'll serve me well for next time I try and run a business or set a goal or run a marathon, whatever your goal is, right? Like I had a client a while ago who was training for the London Marathon. She broke her ankle in training, couldn't do it. A shit thing to happen, like really shitty thing to happen. She was really looking forward to it, really training hard for it. And then, but the perspective shift was, do you know what? I'm going to rebuild this. This is going to be a comeback story. And then she actually ran it the year after. Yeah, and that's perspective rather than, because how easy would it have been to go, do you know what? Fuck this shit. Like, I'm not running ever again.
Yeah, so many people do as well. And I think the other thing that springs to mind of what you said there that needs paying attention to again is so obviously breaking your ankle is, like you say, it's pretty shitty if you're trying to run a marathon. It's a hard one to kind of manage your disappointment. But what I see people do is they don't learn from the shitty bit. For her, I don't know, it might have been that she really, really could have done with some new trainers to support her ankle or something. I don't know. But with other things, when you hear yourself saying, why does this keep happening to me? Or here I go again, something else has kind of not quite worked out. Maybe, just maybe, there's something that you could be doing differently and take the lesson. Because if we don't actually take the lesson, in my book, I call it the resit class. You know, you're back in the resit class again and again and again, because you haven't taken the thing that, and the thing might be that you are, you know, you're running around after everyone else, and your lesson is to just minimize that a little bit. So there's something that you need to like pay attention to, because it will just keep giving you another example if you don't.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm getting things popping into my head now. It's like reset class. Like, do you know what? It's really weird. You know, like I've done a social media marketing course last year as part of like some CPD stuff, and I'm sitting there in the audience, and I'm looking, and I know what they're doing. Like they're marketing to me, and they're going to sell me something at the end. Like I know what they're doing, 100%. Like I know this process, I know the framework, but my brain still goes with it. Your brain still goes in that, like, so even though you're aware of this stuff, and even though you're conscious of this stuff, you still got to like work on it. You can still be pulled into it, even if you are aware of it.
Yeah, 100%. Because a lot of our, I mean, that's where marketing can be very, very clever. A lot of our processing, they're like filters, are biased. So we have these unconscious bias. So if you're being sold something, and even though you know you're being sold it, if the way they're doing it speaks to you, if they're saying all the right relatable things, if you like the person, all these different things, if you're looking around thinking, well, everyone else seems to be into this, so I must as well. All these things are all these layers and layers and layers and layers of things that help us make decisions in that moment. And clever marketeers, obviously know how to do some of that stuff. But I've been in those positions myself where I'm like, I can see exactly what they're doing here. You know, and they start telling you there's only one space left, and if you don't get it now, and all the FOMO stuff. But you can still get sucked in.
Yeah, 100%, because it's playing on human bias and human nature, isn't it? And even though you are conscious of it, it's like I always say, I'm the easiest person in the world to sell to. I'm like, I will happily buy expensive things if it's the right stuff, even though I'm conscious of it, like all the crap out there, and I'm conscious of everything out there. I'm easy to sell to, but only with the right stuff.
Yeah, that's what's interesting, isn't it? About what we think we're interested in, and what we think we're being sold. What's that one thing that you've heard that tells you that it's the right? But you can change your buying strategy. I mean, you'll have a buying strategy. You know, this is where I love to really help people understand themselves. You know, we'll all have a buying strategy. You know, yours might be, see it feels good, I want it. It might be, see it, I've got to look at the price, I like the feel of it, buy it. It might be, I've got to go away and look into a million different options first. So we've all got all these strategies that we're using all the time. That's why sometimes in a partnership, in a couple, your buying strategies are different. So you both got to buy a new car, and your buying strategy is, if it feels good, I want it. And the other person's buying strategy might be, oh no, we need to do some research. We need to go out and have a really good think about it. Need to look for other options. And already you're in conflict. And it's not that you're in conflict. It's a bit like what you were saying before about looking at what it is that you're actually arguing about. It's not that you're in conflict. It's just that you do it differently.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose being in the social media marketing world now, like, it's the same, right? Like, we look at content and we perceive it differently. We look at communications, like podcasts like this. Like, one person's take on this podcast might be different from another, and that's fine.
And it will be, yeah.
But that's so interesting. It's so interesting. You mentioned about your book there as well. I really want to touch on that. Tell us a little bit about the book, but a book is something that I've always thought, right? So one of my sort of big life goals is to write a book. So I'm very interested in this. I will write a book at some point. Firstly, what's the process like of actually writing a book? And two, what's the book about, and why are books still an important part of teaching and learning and everything else?
I mean, I think obviously books are. I'm really passionate about books still, because I think while you can get the information on other platforms, as we've said earlier, I think there's something quite powerful about people sitting and reading from somebody else's experience or knowledge, or if it's a story, for you to get lost in the story. I think there's something very important about that still for us all. It is dying a little bit, which is a concern, but I think, you know, we've got to keep that going. For me, I mean, you know, I touched on before, I wasn't confident at all when I was younger. I was told, you know, you're not really that clever and all these things. So the fact that I've even written a book is, you know, goes against everything that I had been told for the whole of my childhood. But for me, I didn't really know I was writing a book at first. People used to say to me, we should write all this stuff down that you've learned. So all the stuff I've learned myself, and then all the stuff I've learned in my training as a therapist, training as a coach, NLP, all the things that I've done. So I used to just write topics. I used to write all this content. I had masses of content with no structure whatsoever. And I used to just write periodically. And this went on for like 7 years or something. And I'd not for solidly. So I'd not write for months, 6 months even sometimes. And then I'd get it back out and I'd write another topic, or I'd see somebody about something. I think, oh, I'll write about people pleasing, or I'll write about fear of rejection. So it was just all content. Never really knew what was going to happen. And then I got introduced to somebody who could help me with structure. So that suddenly changed kind of the fact that this could turn into, because I used to open my laptop and there'd be this Word document that would just look like toilet roll. It just was endless. And I used to shut the laptop and think, oh my God, I can't do that. I don't even know how to turn it into a book. So anyway, get working with somebody who could help me with structure. And suddenly it starts to shape. It starts to look like a book. And it was a long process undoing this chain of toilet roll into something that could resemble a book. And it is a self-help book. It takes you on a journey to understand yourself, the first one anyway. It's full of exercises and case studies and things to help you kind of understand yourself. So for what I'm sharing is, here's the general idea, and then you've got to work out what your thing is. But I guide you to be able to work out where you're going to be at. But what's really interesting, when I started to pull this together, I pulled out quite a lot of content that I felt like I'd got into too much detail about relationships, because a lot of my book is about the relationship you've got with yourself. So I pulled it all out and I chucked it in a Word document and thought, one day maybe. And then when we were locked down, I thought, maybe I will have a look and see what there is. So I went from writing the first book, which took me probably off and on about 8 years, and I wrote the second one in 8 months.
Wow.
Partly because I'd learned a lot about how to structure a book. I had a structure this time. So if you are writing a book, I would suggest that you get a structure of some description, not just write reams like I did, because it takes so long to work out which bit's going to go where. So suddenly the second book, which is about relationships, was born so much easier, because I had learned a lot, and I'd learned the hard way, probably.
That's amazing. That is like, it's inspiring for me as someone who aspires to write a book at some point.
I'll do it. Honestly, I would urge you to do it.
But is it like?
And I think there is no starting point. You know, I think this is the thing with a book. What I would say is, do have some sort of idea, maybe some sort of, you know, if you had 6 sections or something, just something to get you going. It might end up being 8 sections, but just have something to start you off, and then just start writing somewhere. Just start a section. I don't think we write a book like we read a book. You just start writing. So you might write your introduction, or you might write your, I don't know, your little bit at the back about you, or, you know. And I think the other thing that people often talk about is getting sort of some profiles of your ideal readers. And when you're writing, write as if you're writing to them. So whoever your ideal, so for me, it's somebody who likes self-development, who is curious about their minds, who knows that they could probably have more than they've got. So I wrote for those people.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. Similar to I suppose it's a similar thought exercise to what I do with social media clients. It's like I always say, a lot of my clients come to me because they've had typically bad experience with marketing companies before. I'd say like 80% of my clients have had a previous not great experience with a marketing company, so they'll come to me, and the first thing I say to them is, what were you actually doing with them? So they'll say stuff like, yeah, we've done the ideal client work, we've done the targeted audience stuff, we've done all that, which is right. That's factually correct. We need to do that stuff. But I think there's something before that, and it's the ideal you. It's like, what aligns with you? What are your values? What's your mission? Who are you trying to get aligned to your mission, not you aligning to someone else and just trying to sell them?
Yeah,
Because that's when you get to the point where you're like, you've got pain in the arse clients, you've got people who you're not like, they're not getting you out of bed in the morning, they're not getting you ticking. You're not motivated to go and work. You're probably going to make mistakes and do a bit of a shitty job with them because you've aligned with them just because you need the money, basically.
Yeah. No, that's true.
So actually, when you're on your mission,
it's really important for us to be more like that.
For sure, right? Like, I mean, when you're on your mission and you're on your purpose and you're, like you said, you write for them people, you're not writing because of them. Like, it feels good to you first, and this is why I'm doing it, and people will align to this. That's when you're going to start to get raving. It's hard, and it's a bit of a more long-winded way of doing it, but actually, it's worth doing, because what you'll end up with is a business that you love, audience that you love, clients that you love, raving fans, people who tell other people about your stuff, and your audience builds from there. It's like, that's what you want, really. But that takes time.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen through a few social media posts. Like that,
no, exactly. That's where I think we have got to manage our impatience more for these things, because none of this happens overnight. I think people, they say, don't they, I don't know what the statistic is, but something like the percentage of businesses that fail is, they're so young when they fail. They haven't given it a chance. They haven't tried, they haven't gone through that gritty, horrible space and waited to get past that point. You've got to. And I mean, for me, writing that book, I'm never going to make any money. It's not about money at all. It's about the fact that everything I know and believe in is in one place, and people can have that. And, and I am blessed because I've got loads of reviews on Amazon. A lot of the people, I don't even know who they are, and it's genuinely helped them. That's it. Tick, big tick for me. I am happy with that. That's what it's about.
I love that. And do you know what? Funny enough, you've probably sold, without even realising, you've probably sold more books because of that than what you would if you just done it because you wanted to make a quick bit of money.
You don't make any money unless you're one of these big, massive bestsellers. You just don't make, because it does cost quite a lot to make a book. By the time you've paid, if you're going to have somebody to help you do the content, by the time you've paid your typesetter, got your front cover sorted out, got your, obviously someone like you might have more ability to do those things yourself, whereas I didn't. So I needed somebody to do all of that for me. By the time you paid all that, and then if you do sell a lot of them on Amazon, which I had to when I was first started out because we were in lockdown, they take a big cut. So by the time you've whittled it down, it's pennies, but that's not anything that it's important. That's not important to me. It is about people reading it. I got a message from somebody the other day, in fact today, and she's just read my relationship book, and she said to me, "You've saved my marriage."
There you go. That's impact.
Now that is priceless.
Yeah, for sure. That's impact. That is impact. I love that.
Yeah.
So just to sort of round that up, what are the books called and where can you find them?
So they're both called A Path Travelled. So it's A Path Travelled, How to Make Sense of Your Life. That's the main one. That's the one that helps you understand yourself. And then the other one is A Path Travelled, How to Make Sense of Relationships. And you can get them on Amazon. But you can also get them signed through me on my website, which is www.2-minds.co.uk.
Amazing. And if someone wants to get in contact with you or work with you or just connect with you in any way, where is the best place to find them?
I mean, I'm on whatever platform people prefer. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, my website, you could get and decide which platform you prefer. I'm not as avid as social media as you are, but I'm on all of them. If people want to follow me, I do try and share, content that helps people.
I love that. Do you know what, Alison?
pause.
Like that's I follow your stuff on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of what you do, hence why I've invited you on the podcast. So, I mean, if anyone listens to this podcast today, they're going to get so much insight into communication or coaching or just how to basically improve their life, as I have. So I've learned a lot from that. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I will be putting this out over the next few days, but I'll shoot over all the stuff. And yeah, my mind's a bit blown after that.
That's a good Friday afternoon feeling, isn't it? My mind's blown.
100%. I'm gonna go and put my AirPods in, take the dog for a walk, and re-listen to this back so it sinks in. But yeah, thanks so much. I'm going to put all the links for anyone who's watched this. I'm going to put all the links to Alison's profiles around this video.
Or my podcast as well, actually. You can put a link to my podcast because I've got a podcast called Mental Wealth, the podcast to invest in your mind. And there's 50 episodes there. I'm actually having a break at the moment from recording, but there's 50 episodes and I've had some amazing guests and amazing conversations.
I love that. So that's the Mental Wealth podcast?
Mental Wealth.
Amazing.
It's called Mental Wealth, the podcast.
Yeah, so I'll put Alison's Instagram, LinkedIn, podcast link, everything around this video. You'll see it all over socials. You'll see it on LinkedIn, everything. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.